few slides of this chapter. Okay, we looked last time at the different types of prevention and defense, dimensionality, and we looked at user configurable data collection, logging, and pattern obfuscation. We gave some examples that are related to pattern obfuscation. We looked also at the end-to-end security and how this type of end-to-end security should be managed and secured from the sender to the receiver to the communication channel that is used by the user or by the devices to exchange the data, okay, through using authentication, integrity, encryption, all the stuff that are related to end-to-end security. We looked also at the tamper detection security. We said we need to protect the devices, okay, specifically from a physical way, to prevent anyone accessing or manages to access those CPS devices, specifically those that chapter is about the challenges that we face or that face CPS security. When we talk about securing CPS devices or CPS environment, okay, there are some challenges. Now, why we do have those challenges? First thing, because the CPS security is a new area, okay? It is a new area because of it is newness in this area. That means any effort that is related to the CPS security, okay, usually they are based on the existing solutions from existing fields. Okay, for instance, you go to securing CPS environment, you will find some people will apply the same procedure, the same strategy that is employed in an IT environment or in a company environment that does have computers and servers. And as we mentioned last time, we said the CPS are not the same as any other computers or any other device. Of course, they share some similarities with other devices. We can apply or inspire the security procedures or the security policies or measures that are used in other field or in other existing field. But at the end, this is not, or these are not considered as beneficial for detecting vulnerabilities or dealing with vulnerabilities of the CPS. Okay, as we mentioned, because we said we do have many issues that are related to CPS and that are not found in other devices, and it is hard to secure, and it is a challenging task for someone to adopt or to use some types of security that is related to CPS. The other challenge, specifically here, we talk about the criticality, which we have mission critical nature of the CPS. Is the same way we picked up power grid, or controlling a barrage, or any other type of critical infrastructure. That means those devices that are part of the critical infrastructures need to have more secure measures to secure them, in order, because if there is any problem, there will be a big impact on economy, on people's life and other stuff. Okay, so that means it is very important to design a security procedure or a security policy specifically for those CPS devices. Another thing which is related to that should be considered when we talk about CPS security is information sensitivity and detail about the physical process. As we mentioned, because those CPS are collecting data from some environment, that means that data is sensitive. It is a private data that should be kept secret, and that also the CPS devices gives us the details of the physical process, as we mentioned when we specified the pattern obfuscation. We said that sometimes you do have some processes that are running right now, okay, and those devices or those CPS devices, okay, will give you some types of, let's say, the physical process that is running inside that manufacturer, for instance, or inside that power grid infrastructure or any other CPS infrastructure. So it is very important to have a clear policy and security measures to prevent any attacks or any attack against a CPS environment. Now, those CPS, here we talk about the challenges, okay, why those CPS are exposed to many cybersecurity breaches. There are many reasons. The first one, which is long lifetime of the CPS system. Okay, long lifetime when you do have an infrastructure, for instance, power grid infrastructure, the CPS systems that are part of the power grid are not supposed to be down at any times of any point, any time during their lifetime. Okay, they should be around, for instance, 24 hours, 7, and so on. And the problem is what? Is you do have, compared to the lifetime of the CPS, with, for instance, you do have the rapid changes in the security mechanism. During the lifetime of those CPS systems, you will find that the security procedure or the security policies have or has evolved. Why? Because you do have new types of attacks. Okay, it is not stable. If you know that in computer IT or in computer field, nothing is stable. It is increasing in as the technology is advancing. It is increasing. It is developing. The hackers or the attackers are developing new ways of attacks against CPS. So this is, if you compare it with the mechanism of the CPS system that is working, has been running for many years with the same process, with the same way. In contrast or in parallel, in the other side, you do have the security mechanism has changed. Okay, this is one of the problems. Sometimes there will be no, collaboration, or there will be no a point that are shared by the security, the actual security, with the CPS system that has been built a decade ago. Another type of challenge, which is by connecting those CPS devices to the internet, okay, or any other device. This applies to any other device, but our topic is about CPS. That means once you connect those CPS devices or those CPS machines to the internet, that means you are putting those devices at risk, okay, because there are many attacks on the internet. There are many attackers as well, okay, and people or attackers might exploit the private communication between those CPS and intervene with that communication and steal the data or the private data. Other types of challenge that is related to the CPS security is the continuous lack of personal training in security area. Sometimes you do find, for instance, a manufacturer, okay, that has been running for maybe 20, 30 years, constructing cars, or constructing, making other items, okay, and they do have a lack of training for their personnel because they're even because of those, let's say, that manufacturer has been running for a long time, and they don't want to maybe they don't see the interest of security, or they don't have enough budget to train their staff against any attack. Okay, that means that lack of continuous personal training in security area might open or has opened a door to the attackers to attack the CPS devices. Another challenge is with regard to the suppliers. Sometimes you will find a manufacturer that has purchased some CPS 30 years ago from a company ABC, and that ABC is no longer existing now, because it has been a long time, and maybe because of financial, for any other reason, that company is no longer running its business, for instance, and you cannot find, for instance, who will supply you, for instance, with the part of that device, or who will advise you, who will, for instance, might give you some component that will allow your CPS device to connect to the internet, and so on. This is another source of inabilities. That it's like you do have you purchase an operating system, or you purchased an application. Okay, let's consider, for instance, you purchased an antivirus from ABC company, and that ABC company is no longer existing, or it is no longer running its business, and that antivirus needs to be updated. Otherwise, it will be an old antivirus. It will not prevent and protect you against newly or new attacks, or new malware or viruses. So that means this is one of the problems that exists, specifically, as we mentioned, for the CPS devices. Are big devices, big machines, for instance, that have been purchased a long time ago, and let's say the non-existing of the suppliers. That means you cannot patch, you cannot protect those CPS against a new attacks. Clear, Shabab? Okay.
Yes, clear.
For now, for the ongoing security and privacy, there are many challenges, okay, that can be applied, and for now and for the future. We do have what is known as the complexity of privacy regulations, managing and incorporating legacy systems, distributed identity and authentication management, and we do have modeling distributed CPS. In terms of the complexity of the privacy regulation, here we talk about regulations that are dictated, or that are stated or made by government. Sometimes you do have, in some countries, they do have some bodies, organizations that are responsible for settings, regulations about the banking environment, about education environment, in terms of security, about CPS environment, infrastructure, power environment, energy and power environment. There will be some organization that are specialized to set specific security policies and regulation and rules for that to run and to manage in a secure way those environment, because they are considered as critical infrastructure, and they might be under attack, which will have a big negative impact on the country, on the economy, or on the people's life, for instance. Okay, and sometimes let's say, these are like an open discussion challenges with regard to the public attention to privacy issues. Okay, here we talk about the privacy regulation are behind the times. Okay, it's like, for instance, you do have the privacy regulations. Let's say if we give it, let's say, weight or a level, we say that the privacy regulations is at level 3, and the public privacy issue is at level 1, which is easy. It is on the rise. Now, what those people who will do regulation, who will create regulations, they will face some problems against privacy issues. Okay, they will say, let's say, for instance, among regulations, maybe you will find an organization need to send its data to ABC government, for instance. Okay. Now, this is the regulation in terms of protecting data, and for the sake of as objective to protect the data. But in the other hand, you will have other people who will, let's say, be against this decision, be against the regulation. Why? Because they are concerned about their privacy. They don't want their privacy to be, let's say, their data to be available or to breach their privacy. Okay, it's like, for instance, you do have, because of the anti-terrorism, for instance, Facebook will send its data or will share its data with CIA, for instance. Okay, you will find many people that are against this type of regulation. Whatever, let's say, the objectives or the reasons of that regulation, some people will say, no, it is a breach to my privacy, for instance. Okay, this is the problem or the challenge that can be faced in a CPS environment. Some data, based on the regulation, there is in one hand the regulation, privacy regulation. We do have in the other hand the concern of the privacy, again, for the privacy issues, and you have to do the balance. And here we say that the regulations are needed. Of course, we need regulation. However, the care must be taken not to regulate the value out of CPS, which means sometimes to take decision whether to listen to the people who are who have raised an issue against for their privacy, with to do let's say balance with the regulation itself. Okay, why? Because now, as we mentioned, for the IoT, which are part of the CPS, they are considered as the CPS devices. Okay, they are providing a huge benefit to people's life, to the consumers. Okay, and it has been improving the economy of the country. For instance, people or let's say manufacturers are manufacturing IoT devices, and people are using those IoT devices. There are many, let's say, people involved in the economy, in the, let's say, creating IoT devices and using IoT devices. That means if, let's say, if you listen, for instance, to those people who are, let's say, who raise the problem of privacy issues, who are against those privacy regulations, okay, that means you will have an impact on the production of IoT devices. You will have an impact on the IoT usage of people, okay, because they are directly related. So there is a challenge of the type of, let's say, between the IoT device or CPS devices, regulations related to CPS devices, for instance, and the privacy issue raised by some group of people in many countries. Another challenge with the regularity of, let's say, with relation to the complexity of privacy regulation, you do have sometimes now the cyber physical object have some organization have changed the way how those CPS device works. Okay, here what we say that producers will always own their wares to some degree, and the consumers will only rent them. What is meant by that? Just we pick up an example. For instance, I think Rolls-Royce for some instrument, instead of making some instrument for aircraft engines, okay, so instead of selling those instruments for the aircraft engines, what they will do, okay, they will no longer sell those devices, okay, but they will, what they will do, they will, it's like they will hire you, okay, they will hire you their those devices, and they will be responsible for maintaining those devices, to do the maintenance. Okay, they can, for instance, diagnose the health of an engine remotely, or monitor how well it's serviced, those, let's say, those devices, and so on. That means they will no longer, they will make engine. Maybe they will make, let's say, an engine. They will make some aircraft instruments, but they will not sell it to, let's say, Boeing. Okay, instead of selling those devices, they will rent them. Okay, they will rent them. That's why we say the producer will always own their wares. What they are producing, they will own it. They will keep the ownership, but the consumer, like Boeing, for instance, will rent those devices or those CPS devices. This is a new way of business that is done by some companies, like, for instance, Rolls-Royce. Okay, you know, because Rolls-Royce is making engine and instrument for Boeing, for instance. So this is what they have decided some way. This is another challenge, okay, in terms of security, in terms of data privacy, because you don't own that device. That means Rolls-Royce can access the aircraft data, okay, or airlines data, whatever, and they are making, let's say, the privacy of data to risk, for instance, for some people. Okay, we said that also the privacy regulation can threaten availability if you set some types of regulation that will prevent people from accessing data. That means the data will not be available at all. Okay, or you will have only that data will be available to some types of people. Okay, and this is one of the problem of the challenge that can be faced. Okay, because people will fear that if I cannot access the data, maybe the data, the nature, for instance, if it is exchanged or if it is provided to other third party, it will harm, let's say, the privacy of some people. Okay, here we said that imply the government at the end, the regulation must necessarily remain somewhat. Here it is advisable not to listen to take into consideration seriously, for instance, at the top rate, let's say, the privacy of data against the economy or against of studying. We need to do before releasing any privacy regulation. Okay, a study must be done, an analysis must be done whether this regulation, what will be the impact of the new privacy regulation against, let's say, the economy of a country, and what that privacy regulation affect, whether it will affect really the privacy of data of people or not. These are, as I mentioned, these are open topic and challenges that might be faced. Another challenge which is related to legacy system. Okay, when we talk about legacy system, that means we are talking about old system that have been built and they still they are still being used by many companies, many manufacturers. Okay, we call them legacy system. Okay, because they have been built a decade ago. Okay, now the question that will be asked is why those companies still using those old machines. For instance, you will find an old manufacturer that is making cars, for instance, they're still using old machines. So the question is, why do you think? Yes, Shabab? Any question? Any answer?
Maybe because they can't stop production.
They can't stop production. Yes. What else?
Maybe because the machines are reliable and won't break down.
Okay. Yes. What else?
Maybe because they're difficult to hack into.
This is not sure, because usually if it is legacy system, that means it has been built 30 years ago where there were no attacks, no internet. Now we do have attacks. They need to be aligned with being connected to the internet, and they will face a lot of attacks because they are legacy systems. Sometimes because of the budget, they don't have enough money. Okay, you have, for instance, you have inherited manufacturer from someone from your family, okay, and you don't have enough, you don't have money, you don't have budget to renovate that manufacturer, to replace those legacy systems, okay, with the new ones, because you need to have a big budget for that. That's why you keep running those machines, whatever, and you take the risk. Okay, so these are some reasons that make people still using those legacy systems. Now, the challenge or the problem with the legacy systems, sometimes those old devices might be unpatched vulnerability because they are older system. Okay, they have not been patched with the new system to secure them against any attack. They are using vulnerable operating system. You will find a machine, okay, that is running because of its physical component. It's still using, for instance, Windows XP. You cannot even install a new Windows. Why? Because the CPU is not. For the simplest thing, you do have this, the memory. Okay, maybe you need more memory, you need more storage, more hard disk storage, and the system, because it is an old computer, it doesn't have such storage that will allow you to install a new operating system. This is at the small scale here. If imagine that you are using a CPS device that is running an old operating system, and you cannot install a new operating system because the physical component will not allow you to do that. They are not compatible. They are not compatible. Sometimes you need to have some new functionality, okay, based on legacy hardware, as we mentioned. New functionality on or built up on legacy hardware or networks or a protocol. That means you will have, for instance, we said new functionality. I will connect that CPS machine, for instance, to the internet. That CPS machine has an old hardware. It is using old network, old protocol, with a new functionality that will allow that device to access the internet. That means all the vulnerabilities that is associated with old hardware, old networks, old protocols will be inherited. That means they will open vulnerability. In all the connection to the internet, which is the new functionality, will inherit all those problems and vulnerabilities related to the hardware or the network or to the protocol that is used by that old machine to connect to the internet, for instance. Okay, Shabab? We said legacy system may rely on insecure protocols because they are old system. They still using protocol that don't use encryption in their communication. Okay, they don't have maybe a new way of authentication. Okay, and it is not possible to integrate a biometric authentication inside with the legacy system. This is another problem, another challenge when you keep using old system, for instance. Now, the best approach to deal with such legacy system is to evaluate those systems. You would say, what happened if, for instance, if I will use, like you create a use case, okay, and see what happened. For instance, if I will input some data late, early, or after some process, and what will happen, what will expect. It's like you are studying what will happen in case of you do have some wrong data inserted or sent, okay, by a hacker to that system that is receiving input data, and how that system will deal, and you will evaluate the impact. Okay, you will evaluate the impact of that data. If it is wrong data, you just like you do fuzzing techniques and in random data, wrong data, and see how the system will deal with such wrong data. For instance, you need to evaluate and study the impact of the failure. If that machine will fail because of that data, you need to have some specific, for instance, at least take decision to have some backup system. Okay, in case of, because you cannot improve it, but you can have some backup of the data, for instance, in case if someone attacks that system and that system is broken or it is damaged, at least you have a backup, for instance, of that data. If a new system can function as a backup for a legacy system until it fails, that means there will be a greatest availability will be achieved. Sometimes you might have, you have the budget, you have the resources to have a backup, a new device, a new machine, that will replace that old machine. Okay, a new machine will be as a backup. Okay, you don't want to stop that legacy system. You don't want to change it right now, but you buy a new system, a new machine, you put it as a backup. In case of that old machine or legacy machine fails, yeah, that new machine or that new system will take place and will replace the old one. Okay, after, of course, you having doing some changes that are related, because usually that machine is not working on its own. There are some other machines, and this is the best way right now not to change, because changing right now, that means you have to change many things. You choose to have and keep that old system to run within your environment. Another challenge that can be found is the distributed identity. When you talk about distributed identity, is with relation to the identity management. Okay, how can you maintain the credential to identify people, for instance, to access to the system, to identify the processes, to access from one system to another system. Okay, this is a problem that needs to be addressed within a specific CPS environment. Sometimes, where we'll have later another chapter which is dedicated to distributed system. Okay, but in here we talk about centralized authority. Okay, sometimes instead of having one place where everyone is authenticated through that place, like you do have a proxy server, where you have people are authenticated through via that proxy server or via another server. And sometimes in the distributed system, you don't have that such centralized authority. Okay, because the devices are distributed. Okay, and it is difficult to manage the authentication of accessing those devices, and you might find people who will break, let's say, the authentication procedures to access some CPS devices. As a challenge, it is challenging to have a new identity management model that will authenticate people, authenticate processes, authenticate systems, where you do have distributed cyber physical environment. It is not one central repository, central device that will have responsibility of authenticating people, but now it is distributed. That means how can you manage to verify the authenticity of people or the processes or the systems from one machine to another machine, where there is no central authority at all existing in that CPS environment. Which led us to talk about modeling. How can you model the distributed CPS? Because once you do a model of distributed CPS, that means you will have an idea about how can you secure such environment. Okay, when we talk about distributed, maybe those devices are linked together. Okay, and you will have some types of interdependency between them, between the devices. And if one machine, it's like here we talk about when you do have electrical grid, depends on enabling, or it is enabled by control network, which is the cyber, and that control network is also depend on electricity to function. That means any failure of one of them will lead to the failure of the other. Okay, this is like a distributed system. You do have those systems working together. We don't have one machine that will have all the functionality. You do have each machine has its own functionality, but all the machines are working together in a distributed manner. That means when they are linked together, okay, they are interdependent, and they do have some types of interaction between cyber part, between physical part. It is a complex system, which led us, that means if any attack on one device or a failure of one device will lead to the failure of the other device. So, it is very important to model a distributed. This is a challenge, okay, modeling such environment in order just to protect against any type of attack in terms of where we do have such distributed CPS. we conclude our chapter here. If you have any questions, شباب.